Well, hello, everyone. This is Tommy at World at War Comics, and welcome to another amazing interview. But before we get into that, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that ring bell so you know all the interviews that come to you. All right. So today's episode, of course, is brought to you by Cien Chilies. They are our sponsor of our podcast, Cien Chilies, CIENCHILES.com. If you love hot sauce, you are going to love Cien Chilies. Go to cienchilies.com. Check out the hot sauce, put some in your cart, and then at checkout, make sure you use the word comics, and you will save 15% off your total. And we're also brought to you by Comic Crusaders, the best website in all your comic reviews, your movie reviews, even music. So check out Comic Crusaders today. All right, without further ado, and you probably are already aware of this gentleman, it is Mr. Charlie Stickney. He is the author, the writer, the creator of White Ash, which is absolutely amazing. He has also written Glarien, which is part of that series. He also has written The Game. He was an executive for Scout Comics. Wait until you meet this gentleman. We're going to have a blast. I think you will too. Without further ado, here's Charlie and I. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics podcast. Today, I got a special guest. Met him at an Ontario event. Picked up a bunch of his comics. He signed them all for me, so I've been putting them in these really nice holders. Charlie Stickney, thank you so much for joining me. Really a pleasure to see you again. How have you been?
I've been really well.
Yeah,
As we were just talking off the air, the writer's strike just ended, and
yeah,
people are getting back to work there. I have a lot going on the comic front, and I'm very fortunate that I have a very large fan base.
yeah,
So I get to make all the stories that I want to make. And so as a creator, I'm in a very privileged position.
yeah,
And but it also makes it very busy
yeah.
because you're constantly creating new things.
Yeah.
I saw one of your interviews with, just trying to think who your last one was with
Oh, Philip Kennedy Johnson?
Philip
Yeah,
Kennedy Johnson. Yes, exactly.
yeah.
Who was talking about how busy he is, and it's a privilege to be
Oh,
that
yeah,
busy.
yeah.
But then you're that busy, and
Yeah.
so even though it's a privilege, it's
Yeah.
it's something that it's like it's a privilege to work, but then when you're
Yeah.
working all the time, you have to sort of sort that out.
Yeah. Still a lot to balance at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe, since you mentioned the strike, I'm glad that it's over. I know that you mentioned that you were part of the Writers Guild. Um, were you affected, like some of the others were, Charlie? I mean, how much work were you not able to do during that? Because you're
Well,
still able to work on the comics, correct, on that side of the
yeah,
business?
exactly.
Okay.
And I mean, honestly, like my journey, like a lot of different people, has been, I've worked in various aspects of the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
Comics was my first love,
Yeah.
but I spent a long time in the entertainment industry, both working in animation,
Okay.
in film, a little bit of television. But for the last 7 years, I've been
Mhm.
primarily focusing on comic books. So
Yeah.
even though I'm a proud member of the guild, most
Hmm.
of my day to day surrounds comics. So it affected me in the sense that I needed to go out into the picket line to
Yeah.
support
Yeah. For
everyone.
sure.
And that was something I did. So it took time up. And I spent a lot of time on social media trying to raise awareness of
Yeah.
what was going on. But in terms of like how it affected my daily income, I was very fortunate that most of what I do now comes from the comic book space.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, just seeing some of the news and specifically like on YouTube, listening to interviews of folks who are on the line, I think a lot of them were affected. So it is, I
Yeah.
am glad to see that people are hopefully starting to get back to work. I think this week, right, they should be back, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken. Yeah.
I mean, as soon as the strike order was lifted, and I think it was like Wednesday night of
Yeah.
last week,
Hmm.
there are people who went immediately back to work.
Oh, good. Good.
But that said, and I hate to sort of cast a downer over all of it,
Yeah.
like the comic book industry,
Yeah.
the film and television industry is going through a little bit of a contraction right now.
Mm.
And so I think there's going to be an adjustment period, and this is something that's happening in comics right now.
Yeah.
Is the market is adjusting to find where its real balance is,
Mm.
because over COVID and over the
Yeah.
last couple of years, the market's been inflated beyond its capacity to sustain.
Yeah.
And so, right now it's sort of readjusting, how many publishers do we actually need? How many stores can support, the people who are out there looking for comics? And so sadly, some publishers are probably going to close down. Some stores are going to close down. On the television side, maybe a streamer will close down. So like it's for the overall health of both industries, there needs to be a little bit of contraction to make sure the best content is being put out and not just a dump of everything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. And I think as a comic fan, I think if we're really honest, we could probably see that a little bit. I mean, there's just so much content out there. And on one side, right, it's really good because we're starting to see some really neat talent kind of come into comics because of the availability. But to your point, it's so much that how do you take it all in? And as a fan, how can you help someone who's interested in comics direct them to the comics that are right for them when there's just a flood of stuff out there? So yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's a very normal process. It happens in the food industry. It happens in a lot of industries, right? You get, I work in the food industry and, whatever's on trend, all of a sudden you have 50 brands of it. And then,
Yes.
Obviously after about a year, about half of those go away because that's not what the market actually needs, right? And so the consumer will decide what is needed, and then those other brands, unfortunately, will kind of go to the wayside, which is unfortunate because lives and jobs are a part of that. But that's just how business works, unfortunately.
Right. And like in the comic book industry over the last like 6 to 8 years, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of money came in from outside sources that wasn't specifically about publishing.
Yeah,
It was about people sort of looking at comics as the next IP gold rush.
yeah,
And so publishers sprung up whose business model wasn't centered around making quality content. It
yeah,
was more about putting out as many of these titles as possible so they could have more shots at things being turned into IP, which
yeah,
in turn flooded the market. The comic book shops just see all this content coming out. They don't want to be left behind. They don't
yeah.
want to miss out on the next hot thing. So maybe
Right.
they're spending a little bit too much. Consumers are like now buying 20 titles a month
Yeah,
versus, the 10 titles that they really want. So
yeah,
it made the market messy. And
yeah,
so hopefully now we're going to go to a point where we don't lose too much of the good talent,
yeah,
but we
yeah,
we pare it down to quality content or quality books that people want to read, that people want to buy,
mm,
that creators want to make.
yeah. I wonder if that has something to do with, obviously I'm a big fan of indie comics. I probably spend 70% of my money on comics on indies just because I think some of the coolest stories are coming out of that. But I still buy a lot of DC. I still buy a lot of Marvel. But I've noticed the quality of some of the storytelling has gone down. And what I've noticed is those publishers, you'll have like an issue 7 that has 9 covers, and you're just like 9 covers on an issue. I could see maybe like an issue 1000 or an issue 500 or a 250, but on a random one, you're just like, and maybe they're trying to offset some of that with
Yeah.
art and some of the other things, which I feel is a sign of, like you said, maybe a little bit of contraction. I don't know if you agree with that at all, or
100%. Like
yeah,
everyone right now is trying to figure out what the new paradigm is to be
yeah,
profitable.
yeah,
And for some publishers, that means I'm going to do more on Whatnot, or
yeah,
I'll launch a Kickstarter so I can go direct to consumer. For
mm-hmm.
some, it's like figuring out I need more variant covers to
Yeah,
sort of, so whatever that publisher excels in,
yeah,
they're
yeah,
looking to do that to sort of augment the overall number of sales going down, because there was a bit of a speculator bubble that happened during COVID where there were a
yeah,
lot of people who hadn't collected comics for a while, who
yeah,
weren't at work, and they're like, I need to make some money. Maybe I can buy and flip comics. And so that kind of ballooned the market a little bit. So
yeah.
all of these things that are happening, we're now paying the consequence for
Mm-hmm.
a market that was inflated, and the stores or the publishers that didn't have the foresight to say, okay, this new revenue stream is not going to last forever, are
Yeah,
dealing with the fact that they overexpanded and whatnot. So
yeah, yeah. Well, that's very interesting. Well, I appreciate you sharing your insight. I know you've been in the industry for a while, so I think that's very helpful for others to understand kind of what's going on because there
yeah,
is a lot of noise out there, and a lot of times it goes super negative, and I don't think it's all negative. I just think it's part of what has to happen when those type of things take place.
Right. And I think a lot of people go quickly to it's because of X type of content or Y
Yeah.
type of content that sales
Yeah.
are going down. But if you look at the general overall business of comics, and this is what I try to tell to any new creator coming in. And,
Hmm.
when I came back to comics, so just, quickly my journey
Yeah.
for,
Oh,
for
that'd be
people.
great. Yeah.
When I was in college, I was looking at two different paths. One was either to go work in comic books or to
Hmm.
go work in film and television. And I interned at Marvel, which is a wonderful time when I was in college. And so
Yeah.
I was really excited to do that until I got a job offer in Los Angeles. When my senior year, I was like, hey, do you want to come work out for this film production company? So I
Yeah.
ended up moving to Los Angeles. So I worked in, animation, like I said, film, television for a while, but the industry was kind of shifting to a point where, if we go back to that dreaded word IP, intellectual
Yeah.
property, everybody wanted something based on something. And
Hmm.
as a writer, I was kind of going up against these brick walls because there were so many things I would pitch, and the
Hmm.
production companies would love them,
Yeah.
but they didn't want to commit because they weren't based on something besides an idea.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're like, this is a good idea, but we need a good idea that's based on something. It doesn't even have to
Yeah.
be. It's like this. It was driving me crazy.
Yeah, I could see that.
I said, you know what? I wanted to do comics.
Yeah.
Maybe I can just create a comic or two of some of the ideas that I'm running up against these brick walls with, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
Um, and so, where it ended up happening was I fell in love again with making comics, and that started becoming very successful for me. And so I kind of forgot about the film and television side of things for a long time, because at the end of the day, I think if you're making comics to make a film or television, you're going to
Yeah.
make bad comics. You
Yeah.
have to make sure that you're making something for the medium and you're embracing and you're loving it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but going back to my point about understanding the business, when I came to comics, I was like, I'm a writer.
Yeah.
What's the best way to do this? Do I want to pitch to publishers? Do I, do I want to do it on my own? Like what are the different business models? How are they paying creators?
Right.
What do I need to do to sustain what I want to do? Which was
Hmm.
White Ash, which is this, the world that you've sort of bought into.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the quick pitch for White Ash is it's Romeo and Juliet meets Lord of the Rings in rural Pennsylvania.
So
Or
neat.
imagine
Yeah.
guys supernatural got stuck in Riverdale, but rather than battling demons from hell, they had to deal with the worst of Mordor. So
Exactly.
grounded fantasy and coal mining country.
Yeah.
And I started looking, and this was like 2016. I was
Hmm.
looking at the numbers in the direct market even then, because back then you could actually see what the numbers were
Yeah.
for real. And what I saw was, if you weren't one of like five people
Hmm.
launching a book, even at a company like Image, which
Yeah.
for a lot of creators is the best independent deal that you can get,
Yeah.
um, I wasn't going to be able to sustain it, because I saw how quickly the numbers dropped off after an issue one down to an issue two. And I
Yeah.
knew what I was going to pay for my creative team. And I was like, okay, best case, I do 4 issues of something.
Yeah.
My other option is I find a studio a publisher that wants to pick it up. They're going to pay for it.
Hmm.
I'm going to give away most of my rights because they're paying for it. And it's
Hmm.
only going to continue past issue 4 or 5 if it's a big hit.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
also like unappealing to me, which was like,
Yeah.
this like, I was like, this sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Oh, this also sounds terrible. What do I do?
Right. Right.
And that brought me to Kickstarter, which had not blown up quite yet. And at that
Hmm.
time there was mostly the Wild West. There
Yeah.
were a couple of good books, a lot of terrible content, but people were starting to do some good things there. And
Yeah.
I put the first issue of White Ash out, and it did well,
Yeah.
which led me to the next one. And from there, it blew up as a brand that was doing really well on Kickstarter,
Yeah.
which started attracting publishers coming over to look at me, saying, "Hey, can we put your book out?"
Yeah.
Which led to a conversation with Scout Comics,
That's right. Yeah.
and Scout picked up White Ash.
Hmm.
And as we were having lots of conversations about, hey, how do you do this for promotion? How do you do that? Scout was like, oh, you have a lot of good ideas. Maybe you could help us. And
Yeah.
so, for a couple of months, I ended up being an editor at Scout. And then the publisher was leaving Scout, and they
Hmm.
said, you know what? We think you'd be a great fit. And so I stepped up and I became co-publisher at Scout Comics for about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So I really got a sense from being a creator to
Hmm.
being a publisher at a company that was doing a lot of independent comics and, working with retailers and seeing the market. But what I realized through all of that was, for me, Kickstarter was a much better home because it was a place where I could communicate directly with my fans. I wasn't trying to sell things to a store. I could just sell it to people. And I had a huge fan base that loved me there. So, and I was also having trouble splitting time between being a publisher, where you're trying to be like dad of all the kids. Being a creator where you have a couple of your babies that you really want to give your love to. And I didn't think that was fair. So I stepped down from Scout and came back to Kickstarter. And that's where I've been doing most of my books. And as a writer and a storyteller, it's a wonderful thing to be able to make enough money to support yourself, to pay people that you're working with a good wage, and to, have an open-ended invitation to make more stories. And that's kind of the position I'm in right now, which, again, it's very privileged and it's very rare in comics, but I know that if I have a story, people are going to come and read them, at least in the Kickstarter space right now, which is wonderful.
I mean, that's fantastic. I think that's the dream of any creator, is to get to that point where at least you're able to self-sustain your lifestyle through the art that you're putting forth. And not a lot of people get to that point, Charlie, to be quite honest. It's not that easy, right?
Yeah, I'm very lucky, and I also get to write the stories exactly the way I want. One of the things that I also appreciate about Kickstarter is I don't need to do a 20-page issue. As you like that first issue of Glarien was the next one that's coming out that we're actually coming back to Kickstarter in 2 weeks. Is number 3, and that's going to be a 44-page issue. Because I was writing, I'm like, you know what?
You're getting close to graphic novel sections there, Charlie.
It's true. But I also think prices on Kickstarter are a little bit higher. And I want to make sure that when I bring a story to Kickstarter, it's something that's worth. You can wait. If only 2 or 3 come out a year, it's okay because they're big, hefty tomes. I print them on really high-end paper, and so it feels like a premium book.
Absolutely. No, 100%. Yeah, Kickstarter, I mean, they just changed the game. I'm fortunate. I live in a small town called Hemet near Palm Springs, and we have a comic book store here in town called Diggers Comics and Collectibles. And so, I go there on my Wednesday and I pick up my comic books. But I have found that Kickstarter has become my second LCS. So I go through, I get my, Wednesday comics, and I have my Green Lantern because I love Green Lantern, those type of things. But then I go shopping, and I find myself scrolling constantly through Kickstarter. Obviously, being on social media, you're being kind of directed there constantly anyways, but because of the content that I follow. But I find it as like a secondary comic book store for indie comics, and I absolutely love it. I think I've backed almost 60 in the last maybe 8 months, 7 months, just because there's so much good content now beginning. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you look at the cover and you read the story, you're like, that's amazing. Then you get it and you're like, that's not what I thought I was getting, right? But more often than not, I feel like it's good quality that I'm getting, though.
That's also the LCS, too.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Yeah. It happens everywhere. It happens everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, look, and everyone's trying to sell their comic with their cover.
Exactly. And that is the first thing you see, right? That's what attracts me immediately, right? Is what's the genre? What's the cover look like? Is the art really cool? And then you find the story, and then that's what makes you buy the second issue, to be quite honest. Yes. So trick me once, I'll buy your first issue. But if I don't like it, obviously I'm not going back for the second.
Exactly. Yeah. I always feel like a lot of my books, my best pitch is if you read the issue.
Yeah, exactly.
I can give you a snappy one-liner, but I'd rather you read the issue, because when you get to the end of it, if you like it, you're probably going to like all my books.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah.
You're a fan for life, hopefully. Yeah. Right.
I can't remember who I was listening to on, I think it was a YouTube channel or maybe it was a podcast, but they were talking about a new fan base that have come into the comics that aren't really into the storytelling as much as they're into just collecting. And like you said, I think it probably started during the pandemic where people were trying to find, Silver Age comics where they could hopefully flip them at one time. But we've gotten such a big portion of those kind of collectors that the stories, right, are being missed a lot. I don't know if you kind of feel that a little bit, and we need to get people back into the stories to really strengthen the industry. And there's a lot of really good stories out there, and I'm wondering if there's just not enough eyes on it because there's such a collector side of the business.
Well, I think it depends on where you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
I also the process of writing. So
Mm.
if you're talking about the process of, say, writing a monthly book at Marvel or DC,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it feels thin, some of
Yeah.
that is about the time constraints that are put on writers to work,
Okay.
right? Because it's
Yeah.
a monthly churn, and it's different. Like I'll be completely honest, like I can take 2 or 3 months to
Yeah.
write a script, right? And yes,
Yeah.
it'll be a longer script, but I can really invest my time in it because I'm not trying to do it on a
Yeah.
monthly schedule, and it makes it
Yeah.
easier.
Mm-hmm.
Versus you're trying to turn it out. So like that's part of it. But I do think that there's definitely a collector's mentality that's come back to comics. And
Yeah.
if you've been collecting long enough, you probably remember in the late '90s there was a
Yeah.
boom of smaller publishers, of new publishers, and
Yeah.
every cover was with holochrome foil with a
I think it was
fighter
in the
on.
early 90s with Image, right, that really blew up. I think Todd McFarlane sold almost 2 million copies of issue one
Right,
of
right.
Spawn. And to this day, it's only worth like $20 because the market's flooded with it, right?
Right. But also like that's like there was a whole bunch of other companies that came
Yeah,
up because of that, right?
for
And there
sure.
was
Yeah.
Malibu and there can't even remember. I'm just trying to think
Yeah.
of like at the time there were like 4 or 5 that
Mm-hmm.
now there that had not been there before,
Yeah.
and whole new universes that you're trying to stay on top of. And there was all these speculators who came in from baseball cards.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
there was all these baseball card
That's
shops
right.
that said, you know what, this is the new hot speculator thing.
Yeah.
So they came to comics and create a comic section, which
Yeah.
more demand for the comics.
Yeah.
But it was a whole bunch of people who came in who didn't know
Yeah.
anything about comics,
Yeah.
really only cared about the collectible aspect,
Sure.
and we're trying to do that, which is I
Yeah.
think something that happened now. So it's history repeating itself, and the whole
Yeah.
market almost tanked because of that. You had
Yeah.
the inflated boom, and then
Yeah.
people realizing this is not sustainable, and
Yeah.
then there was contraction, and are we going to survive this? So I think
Yeah.
right now we're in that a little bit of that contraction. Are we going to survive this? But the difference is with some of these direct to consumer channels that have emerged,
Yeah.
creators a chance to sort of ride this out in ways they couldn't before, because if a
Sure.
publisher goes under,
Yeah.
you have other ways to get your content out that didn't exist 20 years ago.
So
You know,
true. Yeah. Yeah. So true. Yeah. I'm noticing that every time there's a new writer on a comic, it becomes issue number one again too. So I've gotten, I can't remember how many issue number ones of Superman over the last 3 years. And I mean, they got to be over 1,000, right, at this point with Superman. So
yeah, it's true. And
yeah.
because the problem is it's also it's reinforced by the fact that when you do that as a publisher, the
Yeah.
numbers go up,
They do.
and
I
people
mean, that's why they keep doing it, right?
yeah, they complain about it, but people buy them.
So, and I'm one of them too. I complain about it too. I hate it. It just drives me crazy. And yet I come home and I got my ninth issue one of Superman over the last 4 years because there's been so many writers on it. So I complain about it, but I'm the one spending the money on it for sure.
It's also, like for me, and I always apologize to my fans and my readers with White
Yeah.
Ash, because we went from Kickstarter to Scout and
Yeah.
now back to Kickstarter. The numbering is all sorts of screwed up
Yeah. Yeah.
because
But that's explainable, Charlie. That's explainable. Now.
right,
What you see in Marvel sometimes, and even Image does sometimes, it's just not explainable. There's no need for that.
for money, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Charlie, can we go way? I would love to know, like in your childhood, like when did you remember the first time you picked up a comic and you were like, wow, this is amazing.
So so I have like 2 periods of comic, like sort of my introduction to comic stories.
Yeah.
And the first was when I was really young, in like the 5 to 7 range.
Uh-huh.
I think we went on a trip to California back when I lived on the East Coast. And so
Uh-huh.
my parents had bought me some comics for that trip to get me on the plane. And that sort of snowballed into a box of comics that I had that I kept on my floor that, that the covers were mostly ripped off
Yeah.
of. And and so that was like old Marvel team ups with Spider-Man. I had a couple issues of Amazing Spider-Man,
Yeah.
like the introduction of Madam Web. Like that was one of the first comics that I had, and so like, and then there was a couple of Wonder Woman, and like there were
Mhm.
these because there were 2 packs or 3 packs that someone bought at
Yeah.
like Bradley's or something. Brave and Bold. So I had like that box, and
Yeah.
and that was just something that was in the corner of my room, and every now and then I'd pull them out. And
Yeah.
then I fell in love with Transformers, like a lot of children of the '80s, and I was like, I
For
have no
sure.
money. All the money goes into these toys.
Yeah.
I was buying all of these toys, and so like for a couple of years, that was all I put my money into.
Yeah.
And then I was again again, I'll go back to Bradley's, a chain that no longer exists.
Yeah.
And I was going to get the Transformers. And then I saw a 3 pack of the Transformer comics. And it was Transformer 1, 2, and 3. And
Oh
of
yeah.
course, I'm going to get that. And
Yeah.
so I'm reading it, and I get to the second issue, and Spider-Man was battling Megatron. And he was in a black costume.
Oh
And I
wow.
was like, what's up with that?
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
Spider-Man in a black costume? Then I had to go, pick up an issue of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
This was me now at like 11,
Uh-huh.
an issue of Spider-Man, and then
Yeah.
it was all because like because like then all of a sudden this came in right or just like half a year before Craven's Last Hunt,
Oh
and so
yeah.
like, all of a sudden I was like, oh my goodness, now I'm buying Web of Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man, and there's all these references to the fall of the mutants, and what is that? So I picked up an X-Men book, and then they get
Yeah.
and like one title sucked you in, and then all of a sudden by the
Yeah.
time I was 14, 15, I was probably getting 40 titles a month.
Yeah.
And back then it was a little bit more manageable because there were these subscription services.
Yeah.
You get everything for 50, 55% off,
Yeah.
and so like that was, like it was my life
Yeah.
from basically from about 13 through graduating college. Comics
Hmm.
was a huge part of it. I had my own strip in the school paper, in the college
Yeah.
paper, and I really did think that that was going to be my life, writing comic books, being a comic book publisher. And then I went into the film and television industry for 20 years. And so and then I ended up doing this anyway. So I think
Yeah.
life takes you down all these different paths. But I
Yeah.
right now I'm living the life that I
Yeah.
was originally intended to do, and
Yep.
I'm thrilled to be doing.
Now, when you went into film and animation and TV, that experience over that 20-year period, can you draw from a lot of that has made you a better writer today because of some of that experience? Like what are some of the things that you gained out of there that you utilize on a daily basis as a comic creator?
So that there's two sides of it. One
Uh-huh.
is like on the writing side from strictly being a writer, and on
Yeah.
the other side it's the promotion side, how
Mm.
to do all these things that made me an effective publisher, that
Right.
make me very good in the Kickstarter space. And
Mm-hmm.
both of those things were directly influenced by the time that I spent in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Um, I also, for a little while, I was a feature film editor.
Mm.
I edited and produced a documentary. I did some trailers for Hulu. So, like,
Yeah.
all of these things on the promotional side, when I worked in animation, one of the
Right.
things we also do as writers is create pitch packages. And
Mm.
so, all of those things, and they
Yeah.
have animation to them, or they translate directly to what I need to do to be able to sell comics on Kickstarter.
Right.
Uh, from the writing side, yeah, I mean, I think I had an amazing writers group when I first moved out to LA,
Mm-hmm.
and most of those people are either professional TV or film writers now,
Mm-hmm.
who've created shows and done other things, and so we all worked together and critiqued each other.
Yeah.
And so when you're in an environment, and these were just friends, but who are all immensely talented, you all
Yeah.
make each other better writers.
Yeah.
And I think when you go through a professional development process, like
Mm-hmm.
working on scripts and like being able to take in those notes, they push you,
Yeah.
because you often hate the notes that you get, but you're being paid large sums of money to make them work.
Yeah. Exactly.
Creatively, you need to
Yeah.
take those notes that you hate,
Sure.
make them work, but make something you're equally or even more happy with than what
Yeah.
you started. So
Yeah.
I think learning how to do iterations. I think learning how to take criticism.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's something that a lot of particular younger creators or first
Sure.
time creators have a hard time doing, is sort
Yeah.
of taking that criticism in, finding the note behind the note. So working professionally as a writer in all of these other fields for sure made it a
Yeah.
lot easier.
Yeah.
And having contacts in animation when I was looking for artists,
Mm-hmm.
having worked with a lot of storyboard artists and understanding storytelling,
Yeah.
that helps me sort of have a background and a perspective to know what I'm looking for in an artist, but also
Mm-hmm.
to effectively give notes if
Yeah.
needed.
Yeah. Mhm. That's amazing. And then when you were at Scout, I was curious because I had read that, obviously as an editor, I understand that piece, but you also look for talent and you brought in um, certain titles, correct? What,
Yeah,
as someone, oh, go ahead, please.
no, finish your question.
No, I was just going to say, as you're looking for a new title or some new talent to come into Scout, what are some of the things that you're looking for? Is it really the uniqueness of the story? Is it the story writing? Is it like, can you kind of go into what you would look for as you were searching for talent?
So yes, I mean I think there's two different sides to the question. Like
Okay.
what makes a comic book that you can sell in the stores,
Mm-hmm.
and how does one go about looking for those things, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I think in terms of what sells in the stores,
Mm-hmm.
that changes over time.
Yeah.
Um, and you also have to know which company you are, and
Yeah.
different companies can market different books more effectively.
Yeah.
And I think if you're an independent publisher, the hardest book to market is that new superhero book.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
outside of Invincible and Black Hammer,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, there
Yeah.
aren't
Rogue. I think Rogue One, some of the new ones that come out have done well. But yeah, you're right. It's a pretty
it's
crowded space with DC and Marvel, right?
right. And you're
Yeah.
competing against characters that have
Yeah.
60 to 80 years worth of development,
Right.
figuring
Yeah.
out what works for them, what doesn't. There are popular characters that everyone knows, so there's a shorthand to
Right.
them.
Yeah.
So it's a much harder space to break into.
Yeah.
So, I think looking for books in the creator owned space, it's a combination of, is this art sellable?
Yeah.
Is this concept sellable? Is it of a professional quality? Because
Mm-hmm.
at a company like Scout, you do get a lot of first time creators who are
Yeah.
coming. From my perspective, what I was trying to do was, in terms of looking for talent, was to more reach out to creators who had other credits,
Okay.
to buttress the newer creators with
Mm-hmm.
creators the stores could sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because and that's not a knock on new creators who were amazing,
Right.
but if a
Yeah.
only puts out books from creators no one has heard of, it's
Yeah.
harder for stores to sell. So it's
Sure.
it's the same way like when a new publisher springs up, like Boom did. They
Yeah.
acquired the license to Power Rangers because
Mm-hmm.
everyone knew Power Rangers. So the stores were going to stock the Boom books because they
Yeah.
had Power Rangers. And so then that starts making the Boom brand recognizable. And that's why a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these new publishers get the licenses to the established brands, and that helps them sort of make a space in the marketplace. So I
Yeah.
was looking to try to bring in creators that I thought could do the same for Scout.
Mm-hmm.
Creators with a little bit of name recognition,
Right.
and a lot of them were creators I knew that I
Mm-hmm.
Kickstarter or I'd met at conventions,
Okay.
because a lot of industries are small industries, and this
Mm-hmm.
one is particularly small, and a lot
Yeah.
of people know each other, and comics don't have a lot of money to them.
Yeah.
And so you want to find good people that are going to maybe lift up the community, because
Right.
that's how you succeed as a smaller company, when everyone pitches in. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was finding the right type of creator who could hopefully lift the company's profile to help
Yeah.
everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
also who were team players, people I liked, people I wanted to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. What a neat experience too. I mean, 2.5 years. I mean, that's a pretty good time. I mean, what was the most enjoyable part of being an editor at Scout?
Well, I mean, like the editing time was short. Like
Uh-huh.
the editing was only a couple of months, and then I sort of
Okay.
moved up publisher and was like doing
Yeah.
that. I love talking to the shops,
Yeah.
because things I would do is I would call stores all around the country to
Yeah.
talk about Scout, to see what was selling, what wasn't selling.
Yeah.
Um, I loved working with new creators,
Mm-hmm.
because like there's something so special about the first time you walk into your LCS and you see the book you wrote on a
Yeah.
shelf, and it's
For
magical.
sure.
So,
Yeah.
I loved that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the industry in general can be difficult,
Yeah.
and I think it can be very hard. And then the financial realities come through. So I always wanted to prepare people for what those
Yeah.
things were. But
Mm-hmm.
I think like it's at its core, there are so many of us who wanted to get into it because this meant so much to us when we were younger or at a
Yeah.
particular time in our life that we found comics and we
Mm-hmm.
realized what a magical medium they could be. And
Sure.
so to be able to help someone take the next step in their journey, that for me
Yeah.
the most meaningful thing.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of mentorship, it sounds like, took place. Yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah,
very
and I
rare.
still do that in
Yeah.
the Kickstarter space where I
Yeah.
actually like I have like Scout did okay, does
Mhm.
fine, but it's a small publisher.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
in the Kickstarter space, I personally am a top 10 brand there.
Yeah.
So I carry more weight there than I ever did in the direct market. So it's
Right.
easier to help other people on social media
Yeah.
or in the Kickstarter space get what they need done or give them advice that's actionable
Yeah.
that I can't in the same way in the direct market because I can't control all those different stores, but I can
Right.
tell you what you're doing on the project page is not going to sell your book.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about the world of white ash. What are some new news around white ash? I know you mentioned in 2 weeks we'll see a Kickstarter jump out again. Can you kind of give us
Yes,
a bit more insight about that?
sure. So like I said, White Ash is our modern day grounded fantasy series that
Yeah.
takes place in White Ash, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a spin-off series which is called Glarien, which is
Mm-hmm.
the origin story of the world's most dangerous elf. But
Yeah.
it's told through the eyes of a young woman in 1970s New York who's
Yeah.
having visions of being this elf warrior from 3,000 years ago. I kind of look at it a little bit at like Red Sonja meets Taxi Driver, but with elves and demons.
I love that.
And so you know, I love fantasy. I mean,
Yeah.
I just absolutely adore fantasy. But I think when you look at something like Lord of the Rings, it's
Yeah.
hard to out Tolkien. And
That's a good
and
point.
so when you start doing these gigantic worlds,
Yeah.
sometimes it's easy to get lost in them.
Sure.
And people
Yeah.
get lost in their world building.
Yeah.
And why people ultimately care about comics are the characters. They want
Yeah.
big, expansive worlds, but they want characters that they care about. So the way I like to tell my stories is, set them in a place that is relatable, whether it's coal mining country, whether it's New York City, and then the fantasy comes in, but you have
Mm-hmm.
a place that grounds you. So
Yeah.
you can sort of take the story and go from there, and then you build that world.
Mm-hmm.
But White Ash is this big, expansive story,
Yeah.
and I like to sort of describe the relationship between White Ash and Glarien a little bit like the series Lost,
Mm-hmm.
where there was a series like Lost was structured with all these flashbacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the narrative that went forward that was on the island, and then the
Yeah.
flashbacks would tell you kind of how they got there and
Yeah.
recontextualize things. And so White Ash is the main series that's going forward on the island, and
Mm-hmm.
Glarien is a bit of the flashback. And
Yeah.
we have a couple of other Glarien short stories and things like that. And all of that is context to sort of say how
Yeah.
everything started in White Ash, and eventually those things will kind of dovetail together. And going forward, there'll be more connectivity.
That's really exciting. And it's really exciting to see the world continue to expand too.
Yeah, yeah. Like so, we recently did a hardcover of Glarien short stories,
Yeah.
um, and so we've got Glarien Origins 3. Early next year, we'll have more White Ash coming out, and then we have a
Yeah.
couple of one shots set in the universe that are coming out.
Interesting.
I have another series called The Game.
Yeah, I
Uh,
have that one back here. Yeah.
yes, which issue 3 is being finished of that right now.
Nice.
Grounded science fiction series.
Yeah.
Um, and I like to say for that one, imagine if Sam from the original Quantum Leap jumped into the body of the Highlander and had no idea how he got there or what was going on.
That's pretty
Um,
good description. Yeah.
because it's about a guy who on his 30th birthday starts seeing these numbers out of the corner of
Yep.
his eye. He's not sure
Yeah,
what's going on.
you could see you did that on the cover right there with all the
Yeah,
numbers in
yeah.
the back.
And he soon finds out it's this score that's keeping track
Yeah.
of everything he does in life. And what
Yeah.
feels like this cosmic joke he finds out is something more as people start to think he's player number 3 in this game that's been played for 1,000 years. He needs to figure out why and what if he doesn't want to, end up dead. So it's like, and so there'll be more of that coming, and I have a spin-off of that that's in development. So again, I'm in a very privileged place where I get to build these universes, build these spin-off stories, and have a fan base that seems to be enjoying it and growing. And so it's, again, as a writer, it's just a wonderful place to be.
Absolutely. Is it a nice break? I mean, obviously you love the world of White Ash that you've created. Is it kind of a nice break to go to the game and then have another genre that you could kind of develop that's apart from that? Like, do you need that as a writer, a little bit of a break where you have a completely different story that you need to think of? Or would you spend more time in this, obviously?
The truth is, as you write a lot quicker than someone can draw.
That's true. Yeah.
So like the first 5 issues of the game are done. Right. Okay, and so I'll transition over into White Ash for a little bit.
Yeah.
I have another series which is called How I Slept My Way Through College and Other Tales from Freshman Year, which is a bit of a thriller, which is more grounded, less fantasy. But even in that, in a college with a bunch of these young ladies, and one of them finds out her professor's running this high-end escort service using students as call girls. So it's like modern day grounded, but one of them is a comic book fan and does Glarien cosplay. So, so I even tie everything together overall.
I love it. I love it.
But yeah, I do like to sort of mix back and forth between these different things. And hopefully the key is to make sure that everyone I'm working with always has work to do when they need it. I think Philip was talking about that in your podcast too. You do have the responsibility when you have people counting on you for, the work. If you start getting too many series going, like, okay, where is this artist? Where is this artist? Story first. So it's less about like, what I need, and it's more about who I'm collaborating with will need when they need it.
Can you, and I asked this of a lot of creators, and with your experience, I think you would have a really good answer to it. Can you kind of share that dance between a writer and an artist and how important that is? Because within comics, right, you're limited to the words or how much of the words that you could use, right? And so the art really needs to help tell that story. But you have to have, I think, a really good connection with your artist so you're on the same page so that story comes forth. Can you kind of talk to your process and how important that is to you?
Sure. I mean, I think when it comes down to it, some of that comes from who the artist is that you're working with, right?
Yeah.
And I know what I particularly look for in an artist is someone who does good posing, acting of the characters, because I have a lot of things that aren't fight scenes, that aren't like there's going to be dialogue there. So you want someone who can handle that casual conversation of 2 people having coffee. Right? If the artist can draw that and make it interesting, make it feel like it's not just 2 talking heads, then you have someone who's worth collaborating with.
Right.
But I think from a writer's perspective, it's important to know the strengths of the artist that you're working with, how they like to work best. If English is their first language.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Any English. Romina Morinelli, who's incredible. I only recently learned that she's been putting all the scripts through Google Translate because she speaks much English. However, she's an amazing parent, and she gets the scripts. Some artists intrinsically just click with you. And she is someone that I have a rapport with, and she loves what I write. And I think that's also important too, is you need to find someone who likes the kind of story that you're telling.
Right.
So like this is an obligation. Oh my God, I got to draw. Like it's like they're excited to do this story with you. And then I think like the last part is the with you. And there are too many, especially young writers, who come to this who think I'm Alan Moore. I'm going to write, a block of text for every single panel and tell you which brand number 2 pencil is going to be in the shot. And exactly, the angle, the cameras, and For me, it's a collaboration, and you have to know what. Okay, so here's the real key: knowing what you do well as a writer. And where should you hand that baton off?
Good point.
And I trust the artists I'm working with
Yeah.
in terms of the visual
Hmm.
aesthetic of the
Yeah.
book, in terms of where the camera position is going to be. For
Yeah.
me, what's important is where do certain beats land?
Mm.
Because I go back to my editing background. I know
Right.
where the shot needs to cut back and
Right.
forth. And so, it's important for me. This page has this rhythm. It's
Mm.
5 panels. It's going to have 7 panels. It's going to have
Right.
9 panels. Have two. So like the pacing of the story changes.
Yeah.
Uh, and also, how does the dialogue hit? It's this
Hmm.
bit on this panel, this bit on this panel,
Right.
beat of rest, like whatever it is. And so, like, that's important for me.
Hmm.
I'm going to indicate what I need. Occasionally, I'll put in, okay, we're on the same shot here, or
Right.
this should be really tight. But often, I'll let the action imply it to the
Yeah.
artist. So for me personally, is like I break down how many panels,
Hmm.
how the composition of that specific panel is, or how they lie on the page to the artist, because that's also one of those things when you're in the minutia of it. And it's, again,
Yeah.
as some artist and draw myself,
Hmm.
you have a better sense of the flow when you're in it versus
Mm.
when I've written it. Like, okay, well, I went this tight here. I do need to go wider to give a little more perspective, so it
Right.
feels, and sometimes when you're a writer, you have trouble visualizing everything as well as the end product, and that's what these people do so well. And
Yeah.
so trust
Yeah.
your collaborators to make you look good, and that's what I
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. I've worked with an artist from Moscow, Russia, who does the same thing, right? And so his English is quite broken, and he Google Translate, but it's amazing how good he is, and it's kind of refreshing. I mean, we've seen so much talent out of the Philippines, out of Brazil specifically, Argentina. There's quite a few out of Argentina. Yeah, so I think that's really exciting that this whole world of Kickstarter has really brought like a whole host of artists from all these other countries that have grown up with comics like we have, that maybe we wouldn't have noticed if it was just a smaller indie community.
Right, and then these people often get picked up by other publishers.
They do.
Like, it's like, particularly my artists.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, you're always happy for everybody that moves on, but that's got to be kind of especially when you have a brand like White Ash that does have a certain style of art. You certainly don't want to go to an issue 5 and you've had someone who's been reading you for 5 years and you're like, what happened? I mean, this is
Right,
completely
and
different.
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm flexible enough that I can work around the schedule,
that's
and
true.
I'm
Yeah,
happy
yeah,
that these people are getting job offers from Dynamite and from
yeah,
IDW, and like, but it's a sign that you're choosing well,
yeah,
especially that maybe these companies are scouting out artists using your books too.
for
Like
sure,
that's
absolutely.
the other,
Yeah.
Connor, does White Ash, has lately been doing covers for Skybound.
Oh, how
Um, you
cool is that?
they have
Yeah,
put their eye on him, like, oh, this guy is really good.
yeah.
And so he just did like a 5 or 6 connecting covers for Walking Dead.
Oh, how
Um,
cool is that?
and he's got a new cover for Void Rivals that's coming out. So like
Ooh.
they're putting him on the good books.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited about. I get chills thinking about Void Rivals, by the way, because I'm a big Transformer fan, so I can't wait. And then tomorrow, Transformers comes out, so I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I mean, that's so exciting. And like you said, we talked a little bit about mentorship a little bit earlier when you were at Boom, just to have an artist that you've created this path for them to be noticed by someone else, right? Without White Ash, that connection might not have ever been made. I mean, who knows, right? But that's pretty awesome that you've been able to provide that for someone like that. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I never want to say that any of the artists who have worked with me only succeeded because they were seen through my
Yeah,
books. That
yeah,
said, if what we did together helped them take
for
another
sure.
step in their career, that does make
Yeah,
me very.
yeah. I mean, I think that's so neat that they get that kind of exposure. So now, where can people buy your comics if they want to go back and maybe they haven't gotten into White Ash? Where do they go to get season 1 and jump into season 2?
Well, so I would say there are two really good places that they can
Okay,
sort of pick up content. One is, and I can give you the link for this. Uh,
beautiful. Thank you.
Monday the 16th, there will be a Glarien Kickstarter launching,
Hmm.
and you can sign up right now for our pre-launch page. And
Beautiful.
especially on day 1 and 2, we have a lot of discounted catch-up tiers. So
Awesome.
that's the cheapest way. And we'll have a White Ash Universe package which you can get every book in the White Ash universe.
Love it.
We have White Ash Comics Universe Pack, which includes all the issues of the game and how I slept my way through college and the other things we do. So there are ways for you to catch up much cheaper than you could through the store.
Yeah.
But usually from our Kickstarters, we have a link to our web store.
Yeah.
And then, you can also get the trade for the first season of White Ash through Scout Comics.
Yeah.
And I think it's also available on Amazon,
Mm.
Barnes and Noble. So it's nice that it's out there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool. Like you said, that when you walk into the comic book store for the first time and you see your comic book, what a feeling. When you walk into a Barnes and Noble, Charlie, I think that would be kind of cool too.
It really, like, unfortunately, I never made, because this came out like a year and a half ago. I never
Yeah.
made it to one of the ones that had it on the
Yeah.
shelf.
Yeah.
But
They're out there though.
no, it's definitely there.
Yeah.
Lots of people send me pictures of
That's
walking
cool.
to their Barnes and Noble, turning it out so it was
Yeah. There you go.
facing the right way,
Give
so
me some
people
good
could see them.
placement while you're in there, right?
Right. That's right.
That's pretty exciting, Charlie. Are we missing anything? Anything else that you would like to share, Charlie, of what you're kind of working on that people should be looking out for? I mean, obviously the Kickstarter is the number one thing. We'll make sure we put the link on everything when we send that out so people could go and sign up right now and get notified on day one when it goes live. What else? Is there anything else that you want people to know?
The other thing I can think of for right now is if you're in the Los Angeles area, I
Mm-hmm.
will be at LA Comic Con.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
have a
Good.
booth there. We're gonna do a nice
Yeah.
little big 10 by 20 with a couple of end caps. So
Beautiful.
if you're there, come say hello. I'm
Yeah.
happy to sign books. Connor may be out from New Jersey if I can twist his arm a little bit. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah.
It should be a good time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm hoping to be there, so I would love to see you again, Charlie. But and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you making time for me today. Really enjoyed meeting you in Ontario. I thought it was San Diego. I'm like, wait, that was longer ago when I met you. Not San Diego.
Again, we could have, like, San Diego was chaos. There
It was
definitely
such chaos. It was such. I mean, I loved it. It was exciting chaos, but
good
it
chaos.
was chaos. It was good chaos. But Ontario, I love that show because it gets crowded, but not too much to where you can't function, shake hands, and say hi to everybody. So yeah, that's where I bought everything. I mean, you sold me on the story, and I absolutely loved it. So
So I will be back at Ontario this year,
oh, good.
but I'm probably going to be on the exhibit floor to get a
Okay.
big
Yeah.
booth space.
Yeah.
So I will see you there, hopefully.
Oh, I would love that, Charlie. I would love that. But really, so I mean, I know I reached out to you and you were so quick to respond, and we were able to get a date really fast. So I really appreciate you coming on. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you, Charlie. Thank you so much. And I hope we could do this again in the near
Yeah,
future when you have some other
I'm
cool
happy
things
to
going
come
on.
on anytime. And and thank you. I mean, I think creators are always looking for opportunities to have insightful conversations, and I love that you're doing this. And so, really, anytime that I can, come be part of what you're doing, just let me know.
I appreciate that. Well, have a great rest of your week, Charlie. And if you need anything, please reach out.
I will.
All right. Have a great one.